And go to Jacksonville. So the Jets beat the Browns on what was a fumble.
The Jets have the football. They will say that Baker Mayfield coughed the ball up.
The Jets, I'm surprised they know how to do victory formation. 2 in a row. Baby, baby.
Another crazy Sunday in the NFL and a crazy result between the Browns and the Jets, and the reverberating effects, the residual effects we're going to get into here are numerous for the Jets, for the Jags, and most importantly, short-term, for the Cleveland Browns. With Trevor Maddich and Zubin Mehenti, it's Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin. The fellas will be back. We'll all be back on Monday, January 4th. That'll be ready to go for the playoffs. The playoff picture still in flux. We kind of know the situation in some spots, but we're really waiting to see what happens with the NFC East, the bottom of the NFC playoff picture. We know the deal at the top of the AFC, but there's plenty to sort out here in Week 17. It's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. All right, Trev, let's get right to it. The Jets with that stunning win over the Browns. It stands to reason that the guy that might be the NFL Coach of the Year, Kevin Stefanski, is outdueled by a coach that probably is going to be fired within hours of the team ending their regular season on Sunday. That's a topsy-turvy NFL for you in 2020. I want to run down the scenario here for the Browns. Believe it or not, they can still get into the playoffs, although their playoff chances have now shrunk to less than 50%. If they can win against the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday, they can get in. They can also get in, possibly here, if they want to, by virtue of a loss from the Indianapolis Colts, though they got the Jacksonville Jaguars. I wouldn't certainly bet on that. But here's the situation for the Browns that people didn't realize over the weekend what they were going into. People look at it and say, Baker Mayfield, Trev, threw 53 times. What in the world was he doing throwing that many times against the Jets? Keep in mind, the Browns didn't have their top 4 wide receivers, all out due to COVID. And I don't even say that in a passing way. It's 2020. Even the most crazy of things is said in such a staid tone that nothing seems surprising anymore. But just let that settle in. They didn't have their top 4 wide receivers, so Baker didn't have anybody to essentially throw to. Baker also didn't have his left tackle. Baker also didn't have his starting right guard. His top 2 wide receivers, one of them, his top 2 wide receivers, came from the practice squad. Their flight to Newark, New Jersey to play the Jets was delayed 4 hours, and then they had contact tracing on the ground. On Sunday morning, without their top 4 wide receivers, Kevin Stefanski gathered the wide receivers he did have, and they ran routes and went through things in a parking garage to make sure they could all get on the same page. No excuses. All of it happened. They lose. The Jets clinch the 2 spot. The Jags have the 1 spot in the draft. We'll talk about that in a second. But now, after all this adversity, the Browns need to win against the Steelers to get in. They could get a little help to get in, but this was a disastrous performance any way you look at it Sunday, no matter how depleted they were.
So what do you think about them with the receivers out, throwing the ball 53 times anyway? What do you think, Zubin?
It just didn't seem like a recipe for success, considering I think they have one of the best running games in the NFL.
Yep. Now, most people agree with you. I see it differently.
Okay, go ahead.
Right? I don't mind them throwing the ball 53 times. I thought it was the right decision. Here's why. Guess who also knew that they were struggling at receiver? The Jets defense. And they were crowded up at the line to gum up the short passes and to gum up the running game especially. And the running game went nowhere. And when you're a play caller, the first thing you need to do is not commit to the run. The first thing you need to do is string together some first downs. And if your running game is getting utterly stuffed, then you've got to go to plan B. I mean, Nick Chubb averaged just about 2.5 yards a carry. So did Kareem Hunt. They were going nowhere. So what do? You take what the defense gives you. And did the passing game go well? Actually, it wasn't all that terrible. They were able to move the ball through the air, and they were in position to win. The reason they lost this game was not because they threw the ball 53 times. The reason the Browns lost this game was 3 fumbles by Baker Mayfield. One of them was at the 30-yard line, and 4 plays later, their own 30. 4 plays later, Sam Darnold throws an 11-yard touchdown pass. Okay. And then he fumbles the ball on the 17-yard line, and the Jets punch it in from there. That's 10 points, or excuse me, they don't punch it in. They kick a field goal from there. The defense held. So that's a field goal and a touchdown off of Baker Mayfield fumbles deep in his own territory. 10 points in a game that the Browns lost by 7. So it wasn't that they threw the ball so much. The problem was turning it over. And we would have talked about had he not turned those over or had the defense been able to hold on that touchdown, we'd be talking more about how the game plan did a good job of adjusting to what the Jets defense was doing by throwing the ball, even though that was counterintuitive. Instead, because of those fumbles and what happened on those fumbles, we're blaming the offensive coordinator for a terrible game plan. I don't think that's fair.
Let's sum it up one more time before we hear from Baker Mayfield. For the Browns, their playoff hopes have plummeted to under 50%. Would have been a very high percentage to make it had they been able to win against the Jets. But instead, they now need a win against the Steelers. The good thing for the Browns is that the Steelers have clinched the division. So it's just a matter of what they want to do. Does Tomlin want to rest players? It should be an interesting scenario to see what he wants to do. You want to rest your guys, but then again, you've lost 3 of 4 games. You want to keep the momentum going in, especially after yesterday's rally against the Colts. We'll get into that in just a second. So Cleveland with the win over their arch rival Pittsburgh, who really has nothing to play for with regards to the division. It's sewn up. Again, they could also back their way into the playoffs with a loss if the Colts were to lose on Sunday, but the Colts are playing the Jags, who haven't won since week 1. So win and take care of business. Don't depend on Jacksonville.
And the Jags have something to play for, Trevor Lawrence. So they're looking the other direction. I'm not saying they're going to tank, just to say that there might be some influence there that they might not. It might be okay if they lose. Let's put it that way.
Indeed. So the Jags do have the first overall pick of the 2021 draft. The Jets have the second overall pick. We're going to get into that in just a second. Baker's not thinking about it. Of course, he was the number 1 overall pick in his draft. He's thinking playoffs. But after yesterday, he evaluated his play and what is ahead.
There's no excuse. Plain and simple, I failed this team. I put 3 balls on the ground. 2 of them that, they recovered, and then the other that on the 4th down, obviously needed to just hold on to the damn ball. So, plain and simple, I have to hold on to the damn ball. I failed this team. We had exactly what we needed to win this game, and I didn't do good enough. And that's it. There's nothing. I'm proud of these guys for being able to step up. I mean, these guys didn't even think they were going to play. So for anybody to criticize them, shame on you. Put it on me for not doing my job, for not playing at a high level like I should have, for not getting these guys going and finishing out this game. So got to hold on to the ball during QB sneak.
Baker doing the right thing, putting him on himself. Straight Talk Wireless, no contract, no compromise. But again, let me just stick up for Baker. I know he is criticized all day long, but he didn't have his top 4 wide receivers, his left tackle, his right guard, and his starting 2 wide receivers yesterday. I'm guessing Jamarcus Bradley and Marvin Hall were never on your fantasy team, even though I know most fantasy seasons ended yesterday. That's not a fantasy scenario. Instead of throwing to Jarvis Landry and OBJ, you're throwing to Jamarcus Bradley and Marvin Hall, again, without his top 4 wide receivers and without 40% of his offensive line. I'm going to give them a pass. And despite that loss yesterday to the Jets, again, they can get in with the win over the Steelers, who don't have a ton to play for divisionally, considering they've clinched the AFC North as Mike Tomlin and company. Again, even if they were to lose to Pittsburgh by any scenario, they could get in with an Indy loss. But again, Indy playing the Jags. The Jags haven't won since week 1. They've got draft pick number 1. The Jets have draft pick number 2. And that's where we're headed next. Exactly what the Jets might do with pick number 2, especially since we know what the Jags are going to do with pick number 1. We'll get into it with the Jets after I have this from O'Reilly Auto Parts. Synthetic full synthetic oil is back and better than ever. Syntec, powered by O'Reilly, is premium full synthetic oil option that fits any budget. O'Reilly has taken the protection of original Syntec and improved the formula to ensure complete protection against friction, heat, and wear. This synthetic oil is an O'Reilly exclusive that provides the protection required for modern vehicles and is formulated for today's engines. Shop O'Reilly Auto Parts.
John J. Will and Zubin.
The Dallas Cowboys screwed this up